Hey guys, this is our first video. We're going to be doing some Dragon Ball power scaling. We've been part of the power scaling community for a long time, and Google Plus, Comic Vine, and KMC, and we figured we could kind of provide a different perspective than a lot of guys on YouTube. My name's Harrison,
Yeah, and I'm David.
and I think our first topic we wanted to cover was the inconsistencies regarding Battle of Gods to Super Now. Specifically, that the Goku's base form is not Super Saiyan God level, and I guess Dave can get started on that.
Something I've always seen people do, and Seth is the main one, and I actually love a lot of Seth's arguments. But one of the things that I always notice is that a lot of the power scaling logic stems from Goku's base in Battle of Gods being Super Saiyan God level, meaning being universal, and then scaling off of that to now to say that now Goku is millions of times, which we personally disagree with, and I think Harrison can start getting into that.
Yeah, so I guess the first reason why we disagree with them being millions of times universal is the idea that the stories are retellings. So the retellings of the movies and the Resurrection F and Battle of Gods, and you can kind of see the difference in terms of the power scale when the Universe 7 tournament comes up, and especially if you notice that when Toriyama gave a power scale regarding regarding Battle of Gods, he said, Goku's a 6, Beerus is a 10, and Whis is a 15. And also, we saw in the movie, the actual dialogue was that Beerus used 70% of his power.
Nearly 70%, yeah.
Yeah, and he moved 70% of his power. And also, when Whis was talking to Goku at the end of talking to Beerus at the end of the fight, he asked Beerus, "You didn't actually use 100% of your power. You were kidding to draw off Goku's power. If theoretically, Beerus is using 0.00000001, why would Whis ask him that question? It seems a bit silly, especially because Whis is a martial arts master. He must have been at least near that capability, and Beerus was surprised when Whis deduced that. So clearly, there's some kind of misattachment there. And also, arcs change. It's a retelling of previous movie stories, and the power scale changed throughout the series. And to use an old power scale to justify a position, especially when that position is just so incongruent with Dragon Ball today, is really silly and bad logic. And David can continue talking about
Oh,
that.
well, yeah, no. So, okay, so what I want to say is that you can argue that, I mean, Toriyama's scale was obviously referring to the movie. However, the retelling of Battle of Gods is essentially the same thing as the movie itself. Like, you have the scene where Goku rages out and forces Beerus to use 10% of his power. That scene happens in both the movie and anime. And then, of course, Goku pushes him way beyond what Enraged Super Saiyan 2 Vegeta would be able to push him at. So logically, I mean, we can deduce from that Beerus must have been using at least, 50% of his power or something similar to what was in the movie. If you try to scale that to now, you kind of realize, oh shit, well, Beerus is like millions of times stronger than what Goku was in BOG. Therefore, Beerus is millions of times universal. So I think it correlates, and I think Harrison can get into that.
So I guess the first reason why it doesn't correlate is the manga, but I'll focus on that with skills. David can handle that. So I guess one of the main reasons why it doesn't correlate in context of the anime is the way in which Zeno is described or Omni King is described. And I think the first thing is when people are talking about Omni King, one of the main things they point to in both the manga and the anime is the idea that the Omni King's powerful because he can easily destroy a universe. And one of the big things I remember is when, Vegeta was told by Whis, I believe, that Omni King can destroy the entire world, and the world, of course, now we know is the entire timeline and the entire world, which is all the universes. Well, if Vegeta, as would be implied by the BOG scaling, was millions of times universal, why would he be impressed with that feat in the way in which he was? You would assume he'd be able to replicate it with, Kamshu at ease.
Exactly. So here's the thing. So if we scale off that point, we have okay. So assuming that Vegeta's base is on par with Goku's base, so assuming that Vegeta's base is Super Saiyan God level, that would already be universal. But then there's also all the training that Vegeta's done to this point,
Mhm.
obviously, and unlocking Super Saiyan Blue. Which, I mean, if we assume it's a Super Saiyan God with the power of a Super Saiyan, if we assume it's a 50 times boost, then Vegeta would be over 50 times universal. But absolutely in awe of Zeno's ability to erase all of the universes. That's just obviously completely beyond his or anyone else's ability to replicate.
Yeah, Another thing about that is that I don't I'm kind of confused where this base thing comes from because Goku says his power doesn't deteriorate, and that's why he's a Super Saiyan. So the idea he goes into his base is already skeptical. And David talked about Blue, and I think Blue is another one of the big debunkers here. The way Blue is described as a Super Saiyan, a Super Saiyan God with the power of a Super Saiyan. Well, if his base is the power of a Super Saiyan God, you would assume that then you cannot stack Super Saiyan on top of that because when you stack it, it turns into blue. So it kind of makes sense that you would have three yellow-haired forms beneath that. And the manga makes this very clear, and Dave can talk about that.
If Future Zamasu is relative to a guy who's equal to Super Saiyan 3 Goku, and if we assume that Super Saiyan 3 Goku is 400 times universal, this wouldn't make any sense. So I think it's pretty clear that Goku's forms from base up until Super Saiyan 3 are not Super Saiyan God level from the BOG arc by any means at all.
Yeah, and the fact that he had to tap on the God Key in the first place would make it strange if he's already using God Key in his base, even though they can sense him, which also makes it weird. Also,
exactly. Yeah.
Another thing that's kind of weird about it is the idea that I agree, the manga and anime, you can't conflate the two. We agree, but I think one thing that we were trying to say here, even the fact that you can't conflate them, it doesn't mean, I don't think there'd be such a big story change. I don't think the mediums would be that different as far as
exactly. I mean, you have your slight differences like Mastered Super Saiyan Blue versus Kaioken, but the idea that it would be so off that Goku would go from being, multi-thousands, millions of times universal in the anime to like not being universal in his base in the manga, to me is just inaccurate. So, I mean, to me, this applies to the anime as well. And we actually see that in the anime, and I think Harrison can talk about that.
Oh yeah, the Universe 7 tournament. I mean, immediately that's the immediate point where you see the bifurcation between the Resurrection F arc and the tournament. So it starts off with the tournament. We see Goku is using Super Saiyan while fighting against these guys, and the initial assumption is that he's just drastically holding back. These guys are obviously not universal characters. It makes no sense in the context of the universe. If they're universal characters, Goku is just simply holding back against them. But the reason why I think that's a bit strange is because we know from this new arc that using Super Saiyan expends energy. Well, if using Super Saiyan expends energy, why would Goku go Super Saiyan in the first place if he'd easily handle them in his base? It kind of makes no logical sense.
And absolutely. And I think also another thing, again, you can do this is, remember, in the ROF arc, Piccolo is a complete and utter microbe compared to base Goku. Like, if you remember, Piccolo, was below Super Saiyan Gohan by a considerable margin, and Gohan in Super Saiyan was getting easily destroyed by first form Frieza just by him using his finger, just casually. And then base Goku, of course, was stalemating final form Frieza. But then this new, in the Universe 6 arc, Goku in his base is getting pushed around by third form Frost, and even if he's holding back, then Frost goes into his final form, which, if we have any indication from Frieza, is a tremendous power boost. And then Goku goes Super Saiyan and bodies Frost, but then we see Piccolo doing pretty damn well against final form Frost. He's handling his attacks pretty well. He's dodging his attacks, and he even gets Frost in a grip, and he's about to finish him off until Frost cheats again.
Exactly. And that's just another example of it not making any kind of logical sense. I think another example, and something that a lot of power skills miss, is the idea that calcs in and of themselves are kind of inconsistent throughout the series. And this goes all the way back to Roshi. When Roshi destroyed the planet at I don't know what his power level was, but it was in the hundreds.
And destroy the moon, you mean?
Yeah, he destroyed the moon in the hundreds. And he did it with the Kamehameha. He powered up and he simply did it. It didn't seem to expend that much energy. He simply walked away in the manga. And if we take that logic to be true, and if we go by calcs and we look at the size of the moon compared to the Earth, the power level he would need would simply have to be in the 500s. But we know that's not true because, as Enshu says, the minimum power level to destroy a planet is 8,000. And the only time a character seems to be planet-threatening is during Vegeta. Raditz isn't planet-threatening at all. So,
exactly, and again, if you use calcs, you can calc Piccolo's destruction of the moon as a planet-level feat based on how fast the moon gets destroyed, based on how fast Piccolo's beam reached the moon, etc. But there's just no implication. People are in awe. The Daizenshu is always mentioning it as this important note, kind of like with Cell regarding his ability to destroy the solar system. But instead, it's with Vegeta, oh, he's so powerful he can even destroy Earth. It's meant to be a measure of his strength, and the minimum power level to destroy the Earth, I believe, was what, 8,000?
Yeah, I believe so. 7 or 8,000. And another example would be Bobbity when he had his little thing, and he said the minimum power to destroy a planet was 200, the joules. And if you calculate that and you compare it to power levels, and there's already assumptions for that it's way off 500 at 200, and you think about it, Goku being like I think 4,000 and Super Saiyan, that would make literally no sense at all. So I don't understand why physics, which is inconsistent in every other realm of Dragon Ball with councils, would be impervious in regards to destructive capabilities. So it's not
Yeah.
something you can it's not a linear practice. Just because my power doubles this much doesn't mean my destructive capability, responds as a totality as the physics would indicate and as the destruction cost would indicate. Another example of this would be Boo and Stalin, and Skills can talk about that. David can talk about that.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, like you have Cell being a solar system buster at his full power, and then with if you use scaling, i.e., comparing characters how they relate to each other, like how does Cell relate to Teen Gohan? How does Teen Gohan relate to Super Saiyan 2 Goku? How does he relate to Super Saiyan 3 Goku, etc.? You can get the idea that Buhan is many times stronger than Cell. However, Buhan has a feat where he starts crushing the universe via bringing in alternating dimensions, tearing apart the barriers between dimensions, and he's literally crushing the universe. The difference between universal and solar system is literally trillions to quadrillions of times a difference in power. But when you actually compare the characters to each other, you don't get Ultimate Buhan or Buhan being
Yeah,
quadrillion times stronger than Cell.
and you can actually prove it through logical deduction, as David was saying, through Teen Gohan. And so that's another example where calcs aren't consistent. So I don't see why they'd be consistent with God Key as a whole. And the arc, another thing with the arc that's kind of strange is, Beerus himself. Beerus is, not only do you have the BOG movie where Beerus is using 70% of his power and the question was asks, throughout the fight, Beerus is physically worried about fighting Goku. You can see his facial expressions, and I get he's holding back, but why would he be excited if he was using 0.0000001% of his power and was just moving up by, 0. By such a small percentage point that it's, irrelevant?
And
It's
yeah, I understand that. Again, Beer's holding back, but again, the anime's retelling is very consistent with the movie. Like you have Beerus telling Vegeta, "Hey, you made me use. I've never had to use 10% of my power," and I would argue that in this, like I know some people say, "Oh, Beerus was just lying about the power he was using. He wasn't actually using 10%." I would disagree because the only reason he was lying to Goku about using 100% of his power in the anime was because he wanted Goku to bring out his full power. Whereas Beerus already had Vegeta beat. He already had him on his knees, and he said, okay, I haven't had to use 10% of my power in a very long time. So I think the context is very different there.
exactly. I mean, the context is extraordinarily different there.
Exactly, and so yeah, no, this is what I'm saying. Like the difference between the BOG arc and the ROF arc, where Goku really only uses base and Super Saiyan Blue because, well, in the ROF arc specifically, he only uses base and Super Saiyan Blue because base is Super Saiyan God, and then he goes Super Saiyan, and when he goes Super Saiyan, that is Super Saiyan Blue. But they changed that in the following arcs that conveniently weren't retellings.
Another example is that in the BOG arc, when Goku's Super Saiyan and he's attacking Beerus, you notice there's actually God Ki that's coming off of him at some points. But whenever he fights the Super Saiyan later on, we never see that God Ki. We never see it at all. And there's points in that fight where God Ki appear. So that just again to me, it's wildly inconsistent. You cannot use a metric from an arc that's a retelling of a movie, and that's inconsistent in almost every other realm in regard to character power levels, and use it to prove a notion and scale off of it with calculations. There's just so many irrational, thoughts here to me that it doesn't
Exactly.
compute.
And it's not even just that. It's like the idea of Goku being millions of times universal just doesn't line up with what's really going on right now. Like you mentioned earlier with the Omni King, like his ability to erase universes is seen as this incredible feat of power that has everyone scared shitless of him. But if they could destroy millions of universes with ease, then I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
then there was no reason. I mean, him being able to erase a universe is just inconsequential.
And I want to make one thing very, very clear. We're not bashing on Goku. We recognize Goku's a universal character. No question is a universal. And
Absolutely.
We in fact recognize the BOG feat as far as the universal waves to still apply to Goku today. We just don't make linear suppositions, and we don't make the assumption that he absorbed all that power into his base. We recognize
Exactly.
Goku's a powerful character, but we look at things in the context of Toriyama and the context from a third-party viewer, as opposed to a pure hyper. We love to wank characters, but we do it honestly, I guess.
Exactly. And honestly, the way I see it is that the way I would argue it is that, yeah, Super Saiyan God Goku, as of right now, episode 114, is more powerful than the Super Saiyan God Goku from the BOG arc, who was universal. Therefore, we can conclude that Super Saiyan God Goku right now is universal plus. The degree of that, I wouldn't necessarily say is 100% concrete, and I don't think trying to answer it through calculations is the best way to do it.
Exactly. The really only way you can find in the context of the Dragon Ball universe, like numerical representations of power, is through things like Kaioken and through the Daizenshu, and you cannot correlate them to destructive capacity, as proven by Salambu. So I guess to finish off this video is that this is not a bash video on Seth or a bash video on all the other power scalars. We're just trying to provide a different perspective and a different look at Dragon Ball, and looking at it from a more third-party perspective as opposed to the perspective of a power scaler always trying to find the best feats for characters. So our next video is going to be about dimensional tyranny, and I hope you enjoyed this. I want to make it clear again, this is not a a bashing video. So base Goku is simply not Super Saiyan God level. It simply makes no sense, and I'll conclude my part there. Anything you want to say, David?
No, not really. I mean, just look out for us in the future. I mean, again, we're not trying to lowball Goku or lowball Dragon Ball. Heck, up and coming, we're planning on making videos on how far do Goku and characters like Jiren make it in other universes like Marvel and DC and whatnot.
Yeah, so if you want to see that, guys, subscribe to the channel. All right, see you soon.